the previous videos, we talked about the project-oriented problem-based learning. It is a type of student-centered learning, which is the hybrid mode of the project-based learning and the problem-based learning. This type of learning is project-based, and normally the project is open-ended. The students will have to structure the learning process in the mode of problem-based approach, set their own goals and actions, and this is normally conducted in groups that promotes the teamwork, social skills, and communication skills. For easy understanding, we make comparison between the problem-based learning, project-based learning, and project-oriented based learning. The comparison of these three types of learning is summarized in this table. The problem-based learning is more towards fundamentals. It is knowledge-based, and it encourages self-directed learning of the students. For the project-based learning, it is more towards practical, normally involve the real-world problems. The students are guided through accomplishing the project. The learning on the technical part, it will be part and parcel that comes together through the process of trying to accomplish the project. As for the project-oriented problem-based learning, it is the hybrid mode of the problem-based learning and the project-based learning. It is project-based in the sense that the real-world problems are given. The ultimate goal of the students is to complete the project. However, throughout the process, the problem-based approach is used, especially come to identifying the problems, gathering the informations, and generate possible solutions. The learning, it will be more thorough. This will require the students to design their own methodology for the project and execute accordingly. In terms of the applications, you can adopt different types of the student-centered learning at different stages of the study. For a typical 4-year engineering program, you can start with the problem-based learning, which is in the first year and the second year. Within these years, most of the courses are fundamental-based. Your ultimate goal here is to train the students to have their own self-directed learning. Train them the skills to analyze the problem, evaluate themselves, what are the norms and what are the unknowns, and then have them to search for information for themselves and learn the things that they do not know. The entire process can be under the guidance of the lecturers, where the lecturers can be the coach, the guide, or the facilitator. This problem-based learning is easier manageable because the scales of the problems is more discrete and smaller. One thing about the problem, it should be open-ended. The problem can be a real-world problem. It can also be specially designed, simulated problems. You can use this as a start for the students to be familiar with the student-centered learning. Let's say now if there is any presentations, it will be more towards the discussions in terms of the concept and the principle learned. The students are encouraged to participate in the reflections, consolidating the lesson learned through this problem-based learning. And then later in year 2 and year 3, this is when the core engineering courses are introduced. You can go for the project-based learning. Get the real-world problems. Often go for the topics which are practical, and the problems supposedly be the problem that is likely to be encountered by the students in their working industry. In terms of the scales, it is moderate, which is slightly larger than the problem-based learning. And the problem should also be open-ended. This is more towards the problem-based. As for the project-based learning, it is more towards the projects. This is task-oriented, and normally the requirements and the expectations should be in accordance to the requirements by the industry. Since you are bringing the real-world problem, the conditions and the requirement should also reflect that. In the project-based learning, the lecturer will act as the superior or the supervisor, setting the goals and requirements, specifying the schedules, and monitor the progress of the students. The students might need to attend periodical presentations or discussions or meeting, showing their works in order to show their progress. It is normally in accordance to the schedule set by the lecturer. In terms of the mode here, we can say that the project-based learning is partially open-ended in terms of the project, which compared to problem-based learning, there is no elements of the project. The open-ended part, it will be the methodology as well as the solutions proposed by the students. We are trying to simulate the workforce or technical team as typically seen in the industry. That means there may be technical guidance by the supervisor, and there should be evaluations whether the goals and requirements have been achieved. Now, if you treat your lecturer as the supervisor, when come to the presentations, technical presentations is often inevitable. In another word, you can present the project technically using technical jargons, present and demonstrate your in-depth analysis, and so on and so forth. Next, come to the project-oriented problem-based learning. You can have them in Year 3 and Year 4 of the engineering program. This is often deal with specialized courses, and towards the end of the program, you want to prepare the students to have the ability to translate problems into project and to design their own project, and also to explain complicated things in simplified manner. This should be the next levels of the technical training. Not only having the ability to deal with the technical stuff, the students should also have the ability to make complicated things simple, especially when they need to deal with the client. In the actual situations, clients are normally not a member within the engineering communities. They are more likely to be end user, having limited knowledge related to the technical part. When come to the presentations, you will need to use layman, and normally the clients are only concerned about their personal interests, such as the functionality, the cost, the quality, the completion dates, and so on and so forth. Now, if you compare the project-based learning and the project-oriented problem-based learning, different roles of lecturer give huge differences in terms of the requirements and expectations. When the lecturer is the supervisor or the superior, the lecturer is still considered within the field that students is representing. However, when the lecturer is the client, this represents the external party who have limited knowledge related to the field. Now, the students who are carrying out the project shall represent the experts in the field. You will need to gain the trust from the client and not to overburden the client with the information that they do not understand. And you should have the ability to identify the needs of the client and working for the best interest of the client. Having the role and functions different, you will see the emphasis and considerations shall differ. And very often, you will see the things going to encounter in the working industry shall be more closely towards this project-oriented problem-based learning. Therefore, it is recommended to start with problem-based learning as a mode of exposure to the student-centered learning, train them with the ability to learn themselves and find solutions, and then use the project-based learning as the intermediate preparations, preparing them with the relevant technical skills and knowledge. Lastly, come to project-oriented problem-based learning. Presumably, the technical skills and knowledge are there. Now, we are trying to simulate the actual scenario in the industry. Now, in terms of the learning process, it may be interpreted that this is a fully open-ended conditions. The problem should be a real-world problem, open-ended, and normally the scale of the problems is relatively large. It allows flexibility in terms of the project as well as solutions to the problem. Sometimes, the problem may not be resolved by only one completed project. It can be collaborations between different groups. Each carry out different types of projects, where collective solutions of those projects leads to ultimate solutions to the project-oriented problem-based learning work. Of course, this has to base on the creativity of the lecturers to design the learning process. Now, what does it mean by fully open-ended mechanism? As a client, normally the expectations are more towards the functionality of the works. The client may not have the informations and not aware of any requirements and regulations by the authorities. Therefore, the clients cannot give relevant input. This will require the students to have the ability to set their own goals and the requirements. Since it is real-world problems, the students cannot simply define any requirements. There must be some reasons and rationales. And then throughout the process, the students have to monitor themselves in terms of the progress and set their own schedule. This mechanism is very much different from the project-based learning, as there is still some levels of guidance here. However, come to the project-oriented problem-based learning, this one shall be automated. The students will have to do it by themselves. And then the methodology and the solutions are also open-ended. The students will have to design their own methodology and work out the solutions by themselves. As for the technical aspects, more responsibilities are given to the students. They have to do their own verifications, evaluations, and come up with a mechanism to cross-check each other. As far as the clients is concerned, their needs to be fulfilled. Now, how this can be achieved? They are all under the responsibility of the students. Because of the role here as the client, when come to the presentations, it is also slightly different from the project-based learning. The presentations are more towards the project or the product, user guides, and anything that the client should know. When come to the explanations, it must be made as simple as possible in layman terms, so that the client will understand. The focus of the discussions, it will be more towards the interests of the clients. The ultimate goal here is not to demonstrate how knowledgeable the students are, how technical they can be. It is more towards satisfying the needs of the client. Personally, I feel that it would be good for a typical engineering students to have gone through these three types of student-centered learning. Then the students will learn to deal with different problems differently, know the characteristic and the purpose of that kind of learning, and then present their works accordingly. And then I would recommend that these three types of learning methods shall be conducted in proper sequence. This is the simplest method, intermediate, and the most advanced method. You may go straight to the project-oriented problem-based learning, without going through the problem-based and the project-based learning, most likely there will be culture shock to the students. Students might not aware what they should do, how they should come about completing the project. You may also omit the project-oriented problem-based learning. That means you only introduce the problem-based learning and also project-based learning. It is okay, as commonly seen in most of the institutions. However, I would say that it is not thorough enough. You have not prepared the student enough with another perspective, which more closely resembles the functions of the engineer in the working industry. Personally, I observe these problems among our graduates, especially they have problems dealing with the client, paying a lot of emphasis and effort doing the technical presentations when it is not necessary or not effective. Only when all these three has been gone through by the students have the ability to always cross-check their ultimate function as well as who is the audience. Making complicated things to be simple is not easy, especially when you intend not to compromise the technical delivery to somebody who have limited technical knowledge. This requires techniques and skills. I feel it should be practiced in the university in order to increase their competency in carrying out their challenges in the industry. One more thing about the project-oriented problem-based learning. Although we say now the presentations are more towards the layman's, it doesn't mean that we compromise in terms of the technical aspects. That is not the purpose of education. In fact, all these three types of learning method should always be supported with the technical knowledge, which on top of the technical knowledge, we would like to achieve something more, the soft skills, presentation skills, critical thinking skills, the management skills, teamwork skills, and many others. This cannot be achieved through the traditional teacher-centered learning method. You tell the students what they need to do. All this shall end up to be knowledge and information to the students without properly experienced through it. This student-centered learning provides the students a good learning experience, and this kind of learning experience are not always to be positive. There could be frustrations, doubting themselves, pressures, dealing with rejections and failure. This can also be a part of the training. They will need to build out the good characteristics and strong personalities, to be patient, persistence, courage, and so on so forth. Nowadays, the education is not limited to the knowledge. Back to the questions that we discussed just now. Does it mean that when we deal with project-oriented problem-based learning, the technical aspect is compromised? Theoretically, not. Because there are going to be goals and requirements that the student need to fulfill. They will have to resolve everything internally before they present to the client. And normally, this kind of projects are simulating the real-world problem. That means your target is client. Before reaching to the client, you might need to deal with the local authorities and other relevant organizations. The reports will have to meet the requirements of the authorities. That means the quality of the technical reports shall be nothing less than the project-based learning. Just that on top of this, there is one extra mouse here, which is dealing with the clients. As for dealing with the supervisor part, it should already be embedded within the mechanism for you to regulate the technical aspects. For example, for the project-based learning, the lecturer is the supervisor. As for the project-oriented problem-based learning, the group leader shall be the supervisor or superiors. That means we have an additional rows towards the end of the pipeline. That means the content, it will be larger than what is supposed to be for the project-based learning. Larger responsibilities are given to the students. And don't forget that at the end of this project-oriented problem-based learning, there shall also be technical reports. Now come to the practical aspects. The CQI committee or the head of program will need to identify and streamline all this within the program. If you really want your graduates to be really competitive, you will have to make sure your students go through all these 3 types of student-centered learning. I would say that is bare minimum. Otherwise, it will be more towards the initiative of the lecturers. Now, the sequence cannot be guaranteed, and the assistance of either part of those might also be questionable. This will require close monitoring in terms of the curriculum as well as the implementations of the lecturers. Lecturers are encouraged to have those within the respective years. If the lecturers are not aware of these 3 types of learning method, training may be provided to the lecturers. You may also organize workshops to the lecturers, have them gathered in groups, getting those with the experience to guide those who are newly exposed to this. As the outcome of the workshop, they have basic ideas and frameworks in terms of different learning methods. And then straight away you can apply those in the following semesters. In fact, all this is achievable since we have been very familiar to have the assignment given to the students. I would say this is the most easily achievable through the assignment. You will just need to reconstruct your assignment, maintain what is originally within your assignment, adding some features of problem-based learning, project-based learning, and also project-oriented problem-based learning. Know their differences, know their emphasis, know their scopes, and apply accordingly, and guide the students through those learning process. Sometimes you cannot expect successful implementations of all this at one go, because by the time that you are designing this, you do not know the response of the students and the difficulties of the students. Bare minimum, you will have to conduct this several semesters and fine-tune it in order to best fit the needs of the students. This will enrich the learning experience done by the students. They feel more engaged, carrying a larger responsibility. And if this is done properly, you can imagine that the graduate produced by your program will be highly competitive. You should try that.